My name is Renata Calloway. I'm 30 years old. And on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I found my mother wandering a back corridor looking for somewhere to sit, because the seats that were meant for her, the ones directly in front of the dance floor, the ones at the very first table in the room, had been given away. Not by accident, not by some honest mix-up in the chaos of a big event. By design, by intention, by the woman I was about to call my mother-in-law. Table 1. That's where my parents were supposed to be. That's where I had placed them, weeks earlier, when I approved the seating chart with my own hands. Front and center, where the families of the bride and groom belong on a day like this. Instead, they ended up at table 16, the very last one in the room, pressed against the wall beside a rolling service cart and a door that swung open every 40 seconds with a crash and a wave of kitchen heat. When I found my fiancé and asked him why, what I heard come out of his mouth didn't just answer my question. It answered 2 years of questions I hadn't known I was asking. I was standing in a service hallway in an ivory wedding gown, 200 people waiting just beyond the wall, and I made a choice that couldn't be taken back. I have never once wished it could. What I heard, what I did, and what happened to his family in the weeks that followed, that's what this story is about. Before I get into it, hit like and subscribe if this earns it. Drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Now let me take you back to the morning of June 21st, the last morning I ever woke up as Marcus Devereaux's fiancé. Hallowell, Georgia. Population just under 10,000. The kind of town where the woman at the pharmacy has been filling your prescriptions since you were in middle school, and the neighbor 2 doors down still leaves tomatoes on your porch every August without being asked. I grew up on Sycamore Ridge Road in a 3-bedroom house my parents had been paying off since before I was born. My father made the final mortgage payment on a Thursday afternoon in November. My mother framed the canceled check and hung it above the kitchen sink. My dad, Gene Calloway, spent 32 years installing hardwood floors. He had a truck that was older than I was and a tool belt he'd resoled 4 times. By the time I was in high school, his left hip gave him trouble. By the time I graduated college, he'd had it replaced and gone right back to work. He never complained. Not once, not to me. He'd come home in the evenings with sawdust on his collar and ask me what I was reading. My mother, Vera, worked the front desk at a family medical practice. She scheduled appointments, handled insurance, translated confusing paperwork for patients who didn't speak English as their first language. She worked that job for 26 years and knew the name and birthday of every regular patient who ever walked through that door. She kept a basket of wrapped candy at the front desk for children who were scared of the doctor. It was always full. We weren't what anyone would have called comfortable. My bedroom shared a wall with the laundry room. My prom dress was purchased at a consignment shop and altered by my grandmother. But our house was full of food and sound and laughter, and people who stayed past dinner without being invited to. My parents gave me everything they had, and what they had was more than enough. I earned a scholarship to study nursing, took out loans for the rest, graduated without anyone's help, and built my career at a regional hospital 40 minutes from where I grew up. I paid off my debt at 27. That life, that foundation, that was Gene and Vera Calloway. I met Marcus Devereaux on a Friday afternoon 18 months before the wedding. His uncle came in for a consultation at the clinic where I was doing a rotation. Marcus was with him, leaning against the wall in the waiting area, scrolling his phone. He looked up when I walked through, and that was that. We got coffee the following week. We got dinner the week after that. Marcus was the kind of charming you don't encounter every day. Attentive, warm, funny in a way that felt effortless. He took me to places I'd never been. He opened doors, remembered things I mentioned once in passing, and told me within the first 3 months of dating that my parents sounded like genuinely incredible people, and that he couldn't wait to meet them. The Devereaux family was a different world from mine. 3 generations of commercial real estate in Atlanta. A house on a gated property north of the city. Marcus's mother, Alina, chaired 2 charity boards and hosted a fundraiser every spring that got written up in regional magazines. His father, Conrad, managed the company's holdings. Their name was on a building downtown. The first time I met Alina Devereaux, she was wearing winter white in September and carrying a glass of sparkling water like it was an accessory. She looked at me the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they're not sure belongs in the room. "A hospital nurse," she said, with a smile that contained absolutely no warmth. "How fulfilling that must be." Then she told me Marcus had previously dated a woman whose family owned a chain of surgical centers across 3 states. She smiled again. I smiled back. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table and whispered that his mother took time to warm up. She didn't warm up, but by then I was in love, and love has a remarkable capacity for explaining away the things that should be telling you to run. Marcus proposed 11 months into our relationship. Private room at a restaurant his family had a stake in. Candles, flowers, a violinist, and a leaner sitting at a table 40 feet away with a clear sightline to the whole thing. Marcus called it a coincidence. I said yes because the ring wasn't from a leaner. It was from the man who had driven 2 hours in a rainstorm to sit with me in the waiting room when my father was in surgery. That man had proposed. I said yes to him. Then the wedding planning started, and the man I'd said yes to began to blur around the edges. Alina chose the venue, the Devereux Country Club, not the Methodist church on Whitfield Avenue where my parents had been married 31 years ago. She chose the event coordinator. She chose the caterer, the florals, the linens, the menu. When my mother suggested her honey-glazed ham as a past appetizer, a recipe that had been at every important meal of my life, Alina listened with her head tilted and said, "Oh, Vera, that's a sweet thought, but this is a plated dinner. We want to keep things consistent." My mother laughed politely. I watched her hands fold in her lap and stay there. Every time I pushed back, Marcus had the same answer. "Let her have this one. After the wedding, it's just us. Our house, our rules." I believed him. I made a calculated decision to surrender the small things and protect the bigger picture. The venue didn't matter. The menu didn't matter. The marriage mattered, the decades after the party. That was my logic. It held together right up until I realized the small concessions weren't concessions at all. They were a pattern. Alina was establishing who had authority over what, and I had been confirming over and over that she could move things and I would adjust. The wedding wasn't the conclusion of that pattern. It was its highest expression. The morning of June 21st, I woke up in my childhood bedroom. Curtains my mother had sewn from fabric she found on sale. The dress on the hanger, tea-length, blush white, bought with my own money. Alina had shown me a boutique in Buckhead. I thanked her and bought the dress I actually wanted. That was the one thing I kept. By 9 in the morning, I was at the Devereux Country Club. The space was extraordinary. White roses in glass cylinders, gold-edged chargers at every place setting, draped fabric along the ceiling, a 12-piece ensemble warming up on the terrace. Close to $90,000 had gone into this event, the majority of it from the Devereux family, and it showed. 200 guests were expected. Half from Marcus's side, business partners, club members, people who had known his family for decades. The other half from mine. My Aunt Denise from Chattanooga. 4 nurses I'd worked alongside for 3 years. My college roommate. People who drove pickup trucks and brought covered dishes to funerals and didn't know what a charger plate was for. I noticed early that my side of the room was being quietly arranged toward the perimeter. The Devereux guests filled the front, the center, the spaces nearest the stage and the dance floor. My people drifted to the edges. My best friend and maid of honor, Simone, a paralegal I'd known since our freshman dormitory orientation, pulled me aside during the rehearsal walkthrough and whispered, "Why is your aunt in the second to last row?" I told her it was probably just numbers. Their side had more guests. Simone looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who has something more to say and is choosing not to say it yet. The ceremony began at noon. I walked down the aisle. Marcus was at the end of it, looking exactly the way you want someone to look on your wedding day. Put together, steady, certain. I was so focused on the image of him that I didn't examine what was behind it. After the ceremony, while guests moved to the cocktail hour on the terrace, I slipped back into the reception hall to check the setup. Old habit from the hospital, I verify things. I always have. The room was stunning. 20 tables, white and gold, brass name cards at every seat. Table 1, the head table, centered directly in front of the stage, was set for 10. That was where both sets of parents were supposed to sit, along with Marcus's grandmother and my Aunt Denise. I'd approved this arrangement 3 weeks prior. I walked to table 1. I read the first card. Conrad Devereux, Jr. Elinor's brother, the next, Harriet Devereux. Then Marshall Aldridge, CEO of something I'd never heard of. I kept reading. 8 Devereux family members and their associates. No Calloways. I checked the surrounding tables. Table 2, Devereux cousins. Table 3, club members. Table 7, 8, 9. I kept going until I found table 16, the very last table, shoved against the back wall next to the kitchen service entry. A rolling cart with stacked glassware sat beside it. The chairs weren't the ones that matched the rest of the room. They were the padded folding kind, the backup overflow set. The overhead light was a utility fixture, not a chandelier. 2 feet from the nearest chair was a wheeled trash receptacle. Jean Calloway, Vera Calloway. Gold ink on cream cardstock, next to a garbage bin. I found the event coordinator near the bar, a woman named Renee who Elinor had hired and who answered to Elinor exclusively. I asked her who had changed the seating chart. She didn't flinch. She told me Mrs. Devereux had made some adjustments that morning and that the bride had signed off. I had signed off on nothing. I stood in that reception hall alone and ran triage the way I'd been trained to run it. Table 16, kitchen entry, folding chairs, rolling trash bin 2 feet from where my father would eat his dinner on the night of my wedding. If I said nothing, I knew exactly what would follow. My parents would sit there. They would not complain, not to me, not to anyone. My dad would straighten the collar of the suit he'd bought at a department store sale 3 years ago and smile and say it was fine. My mother would arrange her napkin in her lap and pretend she couldn't feel the kitchen heat every time that door swung open. And Elinor would know. She would know that she could place Jean and Vera Calloway anywhere she chose. The last table, the overflow chairs, right beside the garbage, and no one would say a word. And then every holiday after this, every birthday, every milestone, my parents would always be table 16, the people you seat near the service entrance because the real guests shouldn't have to look at them. My father had 32 years of hardwood floors and a left hip he'd rebuilt from the inside out to be here tonight. My mother had spent 3 weekends hand-altering the dress she was wearing, taking it in at the waist, replacing the lining, sewing ribbon at the cuffs. I had watched her do it at the kitchen table, bent close to the fabric, patient and careful, the way she was careful with everything she ever loved. These people were the reason I existed. Someone had put them next to the trash. I went to find Marcus. He was in the groomsmen's suite, standing in front of a full-length mirror adjusting the lapels of his jacket. His cufflinks were silver, engraved with his initials, a gift from Elinor, who moved my parents off the head table. He didn't look away from the mirror. Mom made some changes this morning. It's not a major thing. It is a major thing, Marcus. They don't have seats at the main table. They're at table 16. Next to the kitchen, next to a trash can. He exhaled slowly, not the exhale of someone upset on my behalf, the exhale of someone being inconvenienced. Renata, we have 200 people out there. Can we deal with this after dinner? After they've been sitting there for 3 hours. He turned from the mirror. His face was arranged into something that looked like patience but wasn't. Mom had her reasons. The Aldridges are at table 1, the Hendersons. These are people my father does business with. More important than my parents. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He moved toward me, gentle, measured, the way he moved when he was managing something. You're stressed. It's a big day. Let's get through dinner and I'll speak to Mom tomorrow about it. Tomorrow, it was always tomorrow. After the engagement announcement, tomorrow. After the shower, tomorrow. After the wedding, tomorrow. There had never been a tomorrow that came. I looked at his face. I was looking for something specific, surprise or guilt, or even just the expression of a person who hadn't known this until right now. There was none of that. His face was calm, practiced. He had known since morning. He had known and he had dressed himself, fixed his cufflinks, checked his hair, and said nothing. I walked out without responding, but I wasn't done. On the way back through the corridor, I passed the welcome table and picked up one of the printed programs. Ivory card stock, gold lettering. I flipped to page 3. With gratitude to our families. Below that heading, the Devereux Family Foundation, Conrad and Alina Devereux, the Devereux Whitmore family. 4 entries, all Devereux. I turned the program over, checked the inside back cover. Jean and Vera Calloway were not mentioned anywhere. 3 weeks ago, the version I had approved listed my parents first. With all our love to Jean and Vera Calloway, who gave me everything I have. I had written those words myself. I had emailed the proof. Alina had seen it. She hadn't said anything. She had waited until the morning of the wedding, reprinted the programs with Renee's help, and erased my parents from the record entirely. Not just from the table, from the document, from the acknowledgement, from the day. I found Simone in the bridesmaid suite, finishing her lipstick. She read my face before I said a single word and set the tube down. What happened? I told her in under a minute. The table, the programs, Marcus's response, all of it. Simone didn't gasp. She didn't tell me to breathe or calm down or think about how much the venue cost. She closed her lipstick, dropped it in her clutch, and looked at me directly. What do you want to do? I don't know yet. What do you need from me? Stay close. I'm not going anywhere. She had warned me about the Devereux family 7 months earlier. Once, quietly, and then never again. She'd respected my decision even when she disagreed with it. That restraint was why I trusted her completely. I still didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that the next thing I heard would be the deciding factor. I walked back toward the groomsmen's suite. I wasn't going to eavesdrop. I was going to knock on the door and tell Marcus that either he fixed this before we sat down for dinner, or I wasn't walking into that room. The door was slightly open, maybe 3 inches, enough. Alina's voice came first, low, controlled. The voice she used when she wasn't performing for anyone. Marcus, look at her father. That suit, when was that purchased? And her mother, did she sew that dress? You can see it. They look like they don't belong here. You cannot seat them at the front table with the Aldridges right there. A pause, then Marcus, I know. These are people Conrad does business with. This matters. A floor installer and a medical receptionist at the head table. I'm sorry, Marcus, but it's not appropriate. And Marcus, you're right. The Calloways are better off in the back. It's more fitting. Then Alina, quieter. You should have made a different choice from the start. She's not suited for this family. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. The hallway felt like it had narrowed. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, steady, the way it gets in the moments that change everything. A floor installer and a medical receptionist. That's how they talked about my parents. That's what Marcus agreed with, nodding in front of a mirror in silver cufflinks while my father was being quietly seated next to a trash bin 200 feet away. There are things you hear that you cannot unhear. This was one of them. I pushed the door open. Alina turned first. Her face reorganized itself in under a second, the warm smile, the gracious tilt of the head. Renata, sweetheart, you look absolutely stunning. I heard everything. Marcus went still. Renata. My father's suit isn't the right year. My mother sewed her own dress. They're not suited for this family. I looked at Marcus. You said they were better off in the back, that it was more fitting. His voice dropped into the client management register. You're taking it out of context. You're emotional. I am perfectly clear. Alina stepped forward, hands clasped, the chairwoman posture. Renata, seating arrangements are logistical decisions. You called my father a floor installer as though that was an insult. You called my mother a receptionist like it was a strike against her character. I didn't raise my voice. I had spent years in the ER. I knew how to be still in the loudest moments. And you, I looked back at Marcus, agreed with her. In those words, you said it was more fitting. Baby, come on. I have never been more awake in my life. I turned and walked out. I heard Alina say something clipped and low to Marcus. His footsteps didn't follow mine. He didn't come after me. That was the final answer I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. I went to find Simone. I told her everything, every sentence, word for word. She was silent for 5 seconds, then, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I cannot sign my name to this. She nodded once, no hesitation. Then here's what you need to know. She lowered her voice. The ceremony happened, but the marriage license hasn't been signed. Renee has it. The plan was to sign it at the sweetheart table during dessert. Alina wanted to make it a moment with witnesses watching. It's still unsigned. I absorbed that. Legally, Simone continued, you are not married. The ceremony is symbolic until that license is signed, witnessed, and filed with the county. No signature means no legal marriage. No annulment, no divorce proceedings, nothing. You walk away clean. How long do I have? As long as you don't put pen to paper. But Renata, once you sit down out there, once the toasts start and Renee brings out that document in front of 200 people, the pressure to sign will be enormous. I know. She put her hand on my arm. Steady. Whatever you decide, I am standing right beside you. That's a promise. I found my parents at table 16. Dad was sitting the way he always sat when he was uncomfortable and didn't want to show it, back straight, hands folded on the table, chin level. His suit was the charcoal one he'd bought for my college graduation and wore to every important occasion since. He'd polished his shoes that morning. I could tell by the particular quality of the shine. Mom was beside him, smoothing the ribbon at her cuff. The one she'd sewn on 3 weekends ago, crouched over the sewing machine in the spare room with pins between her lips and reading glasses slipping down her nose. The kitchen door behind them crashed open on a hydraulic hinge, releasing a wave of heat and the sound of clattering pans. My mother's shoulders tensed briefly. My father didn't move. Hey, baby girl. Dad smiled when he saw me. You look like everything good in the world. Dad, I am so sorry. Don't. He held up one hand. I can sit anywhere. This is your day. He looked at me for a moment, the long, reading look he'd been giving me my whole life, the one that meant he already knew more than I'd said. It's our family's day. I thought about the money. My parents had contributed $14,000 to this wedding. They'd set aside money every month for 12 years. Jean's pension payments, Vera's overtime shifts, the careful discipline of 2 people who understood that what you love, you plan for. That money had covered the catering deposit. Every plate of food that 200 guests would eat tonight, every glass of wine, every dessert, my parents had funded it. And Alina had seated the people who paid for dinner next to the place, where the dirty dishes went out. Stay here, I said. Both of you, I'll be back. My mother reached for my hand. Don't cause trouble for yourself on our account. Mom, I'm not causing trouble. I'm ending it. I stepped back into the reception hall doorway and watched 200 guests find their seats. The Devereux guests settled into the front rows with the ease of people who always knew where they were going. My people moved more tentatively toward the back, checking place cards, pulling out chairs that didn't match the rest. The MC, Brandon, a friend of Marcus's from college, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the families of this beautiful couple. He gestured to table 1. The Devereux family. 8 people stood and raised their glasses. Alina smiled radiantly. Conrad gave a small, modest nod. Applause. Brandon glanced at his card and moved on. And now let's raise a glass to love. No mention of the Callaways. Not a word. From across the room, I watched Simone's head turn toward table 16, then back to me. Our eyes met. Something passed between us, the quiet mutual understanding of 2 people who have known each other long enough to communicate without speaking. The first course arrived, roasted butternut squash bisque in white porcelain bowls with a garnish of toasted pepitas. Elegant, expensive, paid for by 2 people currently seated beside the service entrance. Alina and a woman named Claudette, a board member from one of her charity foundations, walked from table 1 toward the bar. Their path took them directly past table 16. I was standing near the dessert station, close enough to see the expression on Alina's face as she passed my parents' table. My mother was adjusting the ribbon at her cuff again. The thread had worked loose during the ceremony, just a few inches of it, hanging from the lace edge. She was tucking it under carefully, not wanting anyone to notice. Alina stopped. She looked at the loose thread. She looked at my mother's hands working quietly to hide it. Then she turned to Claudette and said, at a volume that was technically a murmur but was calibrated perfectly to carry, "Bless her heart. You'd think someone would have helped her with a proper dress, but I suppose people do what they can. Claudette made a small sound of agreement. My mother's hands went still. She stopped touching the ribbon. Her eyes dropped to the tablecloth and stayed there. My father reached beneath the table and found her hand. He held it without saying a word. I have worked in emergency medicine for 6 years. I have watched people die. I have held the hands of families in the worst moments of their lives. I have seen things that do not leave you. But watching my father, Gene Calloway, the man who rebuilt a stranger's porch railing because it was dangerous, and he happened to be passing by with his truck, sit in a folding chair next to a rolling trash bin, and silently hold my mother's hand while Alina Devereaux walked away smiling, was the worst thing I have ever experienced. Not because it was violent, because it was so deliberate, and because he absorbed it with such quiet dignity, and because for just 1 second, I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Not anger, not self-pity, something small and private and ashamed, and he had no reason to be ashamed of a single thing about himself. I was done. I crossed the room, found Marcus near the far edge of the dance floor, and pulled him behind a column. Your mother just humiliated mine, in front of Claudette, in front of anyone who was watching. What did she say? That my mother needed a proper dress, that people do what they can. He exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. Renata, Mom doesn't always think before she speaks. She thinks before every single word she says. You know that. Can we get through dinner, and I will deal with it tonight, I promise. Go over there right now and tell her to apologize. He looked across the room, at table 1, at Alina with her champagne, at Conrad, at the Aldridges and the Hendersons. He took it all in, the candlelight, the white linens. The ensemble playing something tasteful and unobtrusive, all of it. Then he looked back at me. I'm not going to create a scene in front of 200 people. Then walk over quietly and handle it. I don't care how you do it. He straightened his jacket, took a slow breath, and said the sentence that closed the door between us. Your parents are resilient, Renata. They can handle one difficult evening. Let's just get through tonight. He turned, walked back to table 1, sat down in his gilded chair, and accepted the glass of wine his mother offered him. I stood behind the column. The string ensemble shifted into something delicate and European. Servers moved through the room with trays of seared halibut. My parents' money, plated and garnished, circulating through a room where my parents were sitting in folding chairs next to the garbage. Marcus had made his choice. Now I made mine. I walked directly to table 16 and sat down, not at the sweetheart table, not in the chair with my name on it at the front of the room. I sat down between my mother and my father. My mother looked at me. Sweetheart, you should be up there. My family is here, so I'm here. Dad studied my face the way he had studied it my entire life. Quiet, careful, reading me. Renata! His voice was low, a warning wrapped in love. Don't do anything on our account. I'm not doing it on your account, Dad. I'm doing it on mine. I looked across the room to the bridesmaids' table. Simone was already watching. I met her eyes and gave one small nod. She reached under her chair for her clutch, stood up, and began moving toward the side of the room. I pushed back my chair. I stood. The walk from table 16 to the stage was 60 feet, 30 seconds. My heels on the hardwood floor produced a sound that was impossible to ignore, sharp, metronomic, intentional. Conversations died at the tables I passed. By the time I stepped up onto the low stage, the room was almost completely silent. 200 people, 300 candles, and the only sound was the last note of the string ensemble trailing off in confusion. Brandon, the MC, was mid-story. He saw me coming, faltered, managed a weak smile. Oh, the bride, ladies and gentlemen. A smattering of uncertain applause. I held out my hand. He handed me the microphone without resistance. His face said he had no idea what was happening. Neither did anyone else. I looked out at the room. 200 faces, gold rims, white linens. Alina at table 1, champagne glass in hand, her expression not yet alarmed, just watchful. Marcus beside her, jaw tightened. Conrad with his eyes on the tablecloth. My parents behind me and to the left, table 16. I adjusted the microphone. Thank you all for being here today. My voice came out of the speakers clear and level. 7 years of emergency medicine. You learn to be steady when everything around you is not. I know you came today to celebrate a wedding. You deserve to know the truth about what's been happening in this room. Stillness, total immediate stillness. Most of you know me as Marcus's fiancée, but before I was that, and after tonight, I am Jean and Vera Calloway's daughter. I pointed toward the back of the room. My parents are at table 16. I'd like everyone to look at table 16. 200 heads turned. The movement was almost synchronized. A slow, uniform rotation toward the back corner, past the bar, past the cake table, past the swinging kitchen door, and landing on 2 people sitting in padded folding chairs at a table positioned beside a rolling cart and a waste receptacle. I watched the wave of comprehension move through the room. Confusion first, why is she pointing? Then recognition. Then, slowly, the understanding of what they were actually looking at, what it meant. Jim Aldridge set down his fork. His wife, seated beside him, pressed her fingertips to her lips. At table 1, Eleanor's expression calcified. The performance of warmth dropped away, and what was beneath it was visible for the first time. Her hand around the stem of her champagne glass went white. Marcus was looking at me. His jaw was locked. I did not look away. 12 hours ago, I continued, my parents were seated at this table. Table 1. Here, in front, where the families of the couple are supposed to be. That was the seating chart I approved 3 weeks ago and confirmed again this week. I let a beat of silence hold. This morning, someone entered this room and replaced every place card at the head table. My parents were removed and relocated to the last table in the venue, beside the kitchen entry, beside the service equipment, beside the waste bin. Another pause, longer this time. That person was Eleanor Devereaux. Every head at table 1 turned toward her. Eleanor sat perfectly still. The color had left her face completely. Her chin was lifted, the posture of a woman who had never, in her adult life, been publicly named for something she had done. Conrad did not move. He kept his eyes on the tablecloth. When I confronted my fiancé and told him what his mother had done, he told me not to make a scene. My voice remained factual, clinical. When I heard him speak to her privately, what he said, in his exact words, was that my parents were better off in the back, that it was more fitting. Jim Aldridge pushed his chair back from the table, not dramatically, just enough to put space between himself and the people he was sitting with. Marcus stood. Renata, that's your framing it. Sit down, Marcus. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. You had the opportunity to stand up for my family. You made your choice. This is mine. He held his feet for 3 seconds. Then Eleanor put her hand on his arm, and he sat back down. The room was so quiet, I could hear the kitchen door's hydraulic hinge creaking in the silence. From table 9, my Aunt Denise sat with both palms flat on the table, leaning forward, her lips pressed together. She whispered something that I couldn't hear but didn't need to. Let me tell you about the people at table 16. I turned slightly so my peripheral vision could find my father. He was sitting upright, hands on the table, eyes on me, unmoving. My father, Gene Calloway, has spent 32 years installing hardwood floors. He has a rebuilt left hip, 1 good suit, and he has never, not once, failed to show up for anything that mattered. He's wearing that suit tonight. A woman at table 7 pressed a napkin against the corner of her eye. My mother, Vera Calloway, has spent 26 years at the front desk of a family medical practice. She knows her patients by name. She learned basic Spanish to help the families who needed her too. She has a basket of wrapped candy for children who are afraid of needles. I turned back to face the front tables. My parents contributed $14,000 to this wedding. They saved it over 12 years, from a floor installer's pension and a receptionist's salary, set aside every month because they loved their daughter and they wanted to celebrate her. I let the silence do its work. That money is in every plate of food you're eating tonight, every glass you're drinking from, every piece of this room. My parents paid for the dinner, and someone put them next to the trash. I looked directly at Alina. You called my father a floor installer like the word was meant to diminish him. You called my mother a receptionist like it was a reason to hide her. And then you moved them to the last table in the room so your business associates wouldn't have to look at them. A sharp intake of breath from across the room. Claudette, Alina's companion from the walk past table 16, set down her glass and put 2 feet of physical distance between herself and the woman she'd been standing with an hour ago. From the back, someone stood. I didn't recognize them, one of the guests from my side of the room. Then my colleague Dominique, a charge nurse who had trained me in triage. Then my Aunt Denise. They didn't speak. They simply stood like witnesses at a hearing, like people who wanted it on record that they had been present and they had seen. Alina opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Conrad still hadn't moved. I came here today to begin a marriage, a partnership, a life built on the understanding that both people in it are worth protecting. My voice did not waver. I was not going to let it waver. Not here. Not in front of her. But I cannot sign my name to a marriage where my family is treated as something to be managed and hidden. I will not build a life with a man who watches his mother humiliate my parents and decides that keeping the peace is more important than keeping his word. I reached up and removed my veil. 2 pins. I folded the veil in half, then in half again, then set it on the edge of the stage the way my mother had taught me to set down anything delicate with care, even when you're letting go of it. To the guests who drove here from Hollowell and from places like it, thank you. Thank you for being my family's witnesses today. I think we should go home. I looked at Alina one final time. To the Devereux family, I wish you genuinely well, but I have spent 2 years watching this man make me smaller by degrees, and I am not doing it anymore. My parents deserve a front table. They have always deserved a front table, and I deserve someone brave enough to put them there. I set the microphone on its stand. Gently. No drop, no slam. The way you set down a tool when you finish the job it was meant for. I stepped off the stage. My heels found the hardwood floor again, that same steady rhythm, and I walked the 60 feet back through the silent room. This time, no, one spoke over the sound of my footsteps. My father stood when I reached him. My mother was crying, the quiet kind, the kind she always tried to keep private. I put my arms around both of them, right there between the folding chairs and the kitchen door and the rolling cart, in the middle of a room that had gone completely still. Simone materialized at my shoulder with my coat and bag. She had already called a car. We walked out, the 4 of us, past the dessert table, past the string ensemble which had stopped playing, past 200 faces that did not make a sound. Behind me, I heard Alina's voice, brittle, sharp, with something between fury and disbelief. She has absolutely lost her mind. And I heard Marcus's voice, Renata, wait. I didn't wait. The door closed. The last sound I heard was my own breathing, steady and even. If you've stayed this long, you already know why I did it. But I want to know if anyone out there has felt it too, the particular ache of having someone look at your family and decide they don't measure up. If you've ever been at someone's table 16, type it in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Now, what happened after I walked out? That's the part that surprised even me. That night I sat at the kitchen table I had sat at since I was 7 years old. Formica top, wooden chairs that didn't match, a light fixture that buzzed when it was hot. Mom made tea. Dad sat across from me with his hands around his mug and said nothing, which was his way of saying everything I needed to hear. At 9:40, Simone called. The marriage license is still unsigned. Renee has the original document in her portfolio. It was never signed, never witnessed, never filed, which means that legally you were never married, not for 1 second. No annulment necessary, no legal process. You walked away clean. I let out a breath that I felt in my spine. There's more, Simone said. Since you were never cohabitating, your lease is in your name, your accounts are separate, there's no shared property claim. You're in a clean legal position. She paused. He's called 14 times, Alina twice, Conrad once. Already blocked. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen while Mom washed the mugs she'd already washed once. She always cleaned things by hand when she was worried. Dad had gone to bed. His hip was bad, and he'd sat in folding chairs for most of the evening. I thought about the phone going quiet in my pocket. I thought about the alternating emails that would start tomorrow, apologies 1 hour, threats the next, predictions of ruin after midnight. 3 different men in one body. I didn't need his apology. I needed him to have stood up 6 hours ago. He hadn't. Mom dried the last mug, set it in the cabinet, and kissed the top of my head. "I am proud of you," she said. "Your father is too. He's just not built for saying it out loud." She went to bed. I sat in the kitchen for a long time. 2.5 weeks later, I was sick every morning for 4 days before I bought a test. I went to the pharmacy on Route 12, the one where the pharmacist, a woman named Bet who had been filling my prescriptions for years, saw the box, looked at my face, and wordlessly handed me my bag without commentary. I sat on the bathroom floor of my parents' house with the window cracked and the exhaust fan running and 2 pink lines on a plastic stick, and I cried. Not with joy, not with surprise, though there was surprise. I cried because everything had just gotten immeasurably more complicated, and I was sitting on a floor with grout my father had laid in 1996, and the father of the child I was carrying was a man I had walked away from in front of 200 witnesses 3 weeks ago. But I did not cry because I was wrong. I cried because being right is not the same as being easy. Mom found me an hour later. She came in for towels and went still when she saw the test on the counter. Then she sat down on the floor beside me. Her knees weren't great. She sat down anyway and put her arm around my shoulders. "You're not alone," she said. "You have never been alone." "I know. Your father is going to be overwhelmed. In the way that means he loves you so much he doesn't know where to put it." I almost laughed. I told Marcus by email. Simone reviewed every word 3 times before I sent it. 3 sentences. Factual. Final. I was pregnant. I was continuing the pregnancy. Any communication regarding parental rights was to go through my legal representative. His response came in stages, across 12 hours. The first message, "Please come home, we can raise this baby together, this doesn't have to be over." The second, 4 hours later, "My family has attorneys, you don't understand what you're dealing with." The third, at midnight, "You are making the worst mistake of your life." 3 emails, 3 entirely different approaches, all from the same man who could not find the words to tell his mother to apologize for humiliating mine. Eleanor called the house line a week later. She'd gotten a new number because I'd blocked the old one. My father answered. I was in the kitchen doorway. I heard her voice through the receiver, controlled, precise. "Mr. Calloway, I trust you understand that this child is a Devereux. We have resources and legal counsel that..." My father looked at me. I nodded. "Mrs. Devereux," he said, "my daughter has representation. Whatever you need to say goes to her attorney." He set the phone down gently, picked up his coffee, went back to reading the paper. Simone connected me with a family law attorney named Priya Mehta out of Atlanta. Priya was methodical and direct. "Courts prioritize the primary caregiver and the stable home environment," she told me. "You have steady employment, family support in the area, and no disqualifying history. Money is not a legal argument, it is a negotiating posture." We filed the appropriate paperwork, everything through proper channels. No phone calls, no confrontations. No emotional negotiations conducted at doorways. Just documents and boundaries, and the slow, unglamorous machinery of doing things correctly. The fallout from the wedding came without fanfare. No public drama, no viral moment, just the quiet, steady withdrawal of trust. Jim Aldridge called Conrad the following week. Simone heard about it through Priya, who heard it from a colleague whose husband played golf with one of the Aldridges. The conversation was brief. Jim told Conrad that he'd been thinking about the Hartwell development and that he needed to reassess his involvement. Conrad asked what a wedding had to do with a business agreement. Jim said that if that was how the Devereux family treated the people closest to them, he needed to think carefully about what a partnership with them would look like when things got difficult. Aldridge pulled out of Hartwell. a project worth, by local estimate, several $100,000 in his share alone. The development stalled for most of a year while Conrad found replacement investors. 3 weeks after the wedding, Alina stepped down from the chair position on the gala committee she had held for 7 years. She wasn't removed. That's not how it works in that world. She was suggested, warmly, to take some time and focus on her family. The event went forward in the fall without her name on the printed program. I didn't make any of that happen. I want to be precise about that. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't reach out to a single donor, business contact, or acquaintance of the Devereaux family. I didn't need to. 200 people had watched Alina Devereaux put a floor installer and a receptionist next to the garbage at their daughter's wedding. 200 people went home. They talked. Consequences, sometimes, don't announce themselves. They arrive on a Monday morning in the form of a short phone call. 6 weeks after the wedding, Marcus came to my parents' house. I was upstairs. I heard the knock, the screen door, and then my father's voice. Marcus. Mr. Calloway, I wanted to apologize. I was hopping to speak to Renata. She told you to go through her attorney. I know what she said. I need to say this in person. I should have handled things differently. I should have stood up for your family, I know that. Through the window, I watched my father stand in the doorway, arms at his sides. Still. He had a particular quality of stillness that I had always associated with complete certainty. The stillness of someone who does not need to position themselves because they already know where they stand. Can I come in? 5 minutes. My daughter was clear with you, my father said. If you want to be in this child's life, Priya Mehta has the paperwork. That's the path. Marcus's expression shifted. The polish cracked. Something came through underneath it, not genuine remorse, but the raw frustration of someone who had never in his adult life been refused entry to something he wanted. You're going to regret this, he said. My family isn't going to let this go quietly. Dad was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I have thought about many times since. I'm not locking any door, son. I'm just not opening this one. He stepped back and closed it behind him. A soft click, the sound of a latch falling into place. I watched from the upstairs window as Marcus stood on the walkway for a long moment, looking at the closed door. Then he walked to his car and drove away. Dad came upstairs. He knocked once on my door, opened it, looked at me. You okay? Yeah. Dinner in 30. That was the end of it. 5 months later, I had an apartment. 3rd floor of a building 4 blocks from my parents', 1 bedroom, beige carpet, a bathroom fan that made a grinding noise that eventually became something like white noise. It was mine. The lease had my name on it and no one else's. Mom came the first afternoon with a measuring tape and spent 45 minutes walking from window to window. By the following weekend, she'd sewn curtains pale green linen for the main room, white cotton for the bedroom, soft yellow for the room that would be the nursery. Dad showed up the Saturday after with his toolbox. He replaced the shower head, fixed the leaking faucet, installed a new light fixture in the kitchen, and spent 3 hours in the nursery constructing a shelf from salvaged wood he'd saved from a demolition job in a town 30 miles away. He hand-sanded the edges. He carved a small curved notch along the top edge for a name sign. He left it blank. I won't make it sound easy, because it wasn't. There were nights I sat on the kitchen floor and let myself cry, not because I regretted anything. I never regretted anything, but because being pregnant alone means that the 3 a.m. leg cramps happen in a room where there is no one else. The ultrasound technician asks if Dad is joining today. The baby shower is full of people who love you and one chair that is quietly, obviously empty. You chose this. You'd choose it again. But choosing something correct doesn't make it simple. That's just what it is. Myra Jean Calloway arrived on a Wednesday morning at 7:02 a.m. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark eyes. A cry that rattled the monitor beside the bed. I gave her my name. My family's name. The name of a floor installer and a medical receptionist who never once made their daughter feel like she was anything less than entirely enough. My father held her first, after me. He stood at the window with the morning coming in and this tiny person in his arms, and he didn't say a word for a full minute. He just breathed. My mother took 61 photographs. I counted them later. 3 weeks after Myra was born, a letter arrived. No return address, but the stationery was expensive, the kind of paper you buy at a dedicated shop. I recognized the handwriting from Christmas cards Marcus had shown me years ago. Conrad Devereaux. I opened it standing at the counter with Myra asleep in the bassinet nearby. Renata, I owe you an apology. Not for what my wife and my son did, those actions belong to them. But I was in that room. I saw the seating chart changed. I heard the conversation in the groomsmen's suite. I said nothing and did nothing. That silence is something I will have to answer for. I am not writing to ask for access to my granddaughter or to request anything from you. But if a day ever comes when that would be something you could consider, I would be grateful for the chance. I read it twice, folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer of my nightstand beside the small paper wristband from Myra's first hour. I did not respond that day, or that month. Maybe Conrad meant it. Maybe it was something else. I had spent 2 years in a relationship making decisions based on the hope that people meant what they seemed to mean, and I was done operating on hope alone. Time would tell me something that hope couldn't. I was willing to wait for time. Myra is 14 months old now. She has my eyes and Jean Calloway's ears and a laugh like a small, surprised bird. She can say 4 words: no, more, mama, and a word that sounds like that she uses exclusively for my father, who has accepted this name without question. I'm back full-time at the hospital. Last quarter, I was promoted to charge nurse on my unit. The bump in pay was modest. The set of access badges that came with it is not modest in my apartment, where it hangs by the door next to my keys. The apartment still has beige carpet. One of the kitchen cabinet doors doesn't close all the way and probably never will, but the walls are covered now. Myra at the apple orchard. Myra wearing my father's reading glasses on her forehead. Myra with sweet potato on her face and Vera Calloway's hand reaching in from the frame to wipe it. On the bookshelf, my father built 34 children's books, a small succulent, and 1 framed photograph. Jean and Vera Calloway, August 1991, outside the Methodist Church on Whitfield Avenue, young and squinting into the summer light. The custody arrangement came through family court in November. Marcus has 2 weekends per month. He is consistent. He is punctual. He holds Myra for a moment longer than necessary before the handoff every time, and I have seen him press his face into her hair and close his eyes, and something in me aches not for him, but for the version of him that could have existed if he had been willing, just once, to be brave. Myra has one boundary regarding the extended Devereaux family. Any visit requires either my presence or my parents' supervision. Eleanor called this punitive. I called it a boundary. She has not met Myra, not because I have barred the door, but because she won't come through it on any terms except her own. Sunday dinner at my parents' house. 6 o'clock, the same table I've known my entire life. Formica top, chrome legs, that chip in the corner from the cast iron skillet I dropped in high school. 6 chairs, none of them matching. Dad's is a wooden rocker he stripped and refinished from a yard sale. Mom's has a crocheted cushion she made the year I graduated nursing school. Mine is a folding chair, the good kind, padded from the garage. No place cards, no chargers, no string ensemble. Mom made her honey-glazed ham, the recipe Eleanor cut from the wedding menu. Mashed potatoes. Roasted corn because Myra likes to hold the cob even though she can't yet eat it properly. Simone is here with Tobias, the man she met at the courthouse 8 months ago and who is consistently, reliably good to her. My colleague Dominique brings sweet potato pie every week and says it's because she makes too much. Nobody asks questions. Myra is in my father's lap, reaching for his glasses. He lets her have them. He always lets her have them. He bends his head close to hers, like he's sharing something confidential. Your grandpa, he says, quiet and even, used to put hardwood floors in houses all over this part of Georgia. Now I just fix things for you. She drops a spoon on the floor. Everyone laughs. I look around the table. The ceiling light buzzes slightly. Dad says he'll look at it this week. The wallpaper in the hallway is lifting at one corner. There's a rolled towel against the back door from October through February because of the draft. No chandelier, no crystal, no $90,000 venue. But every person at this table came because they wanted to. Every person here belongs, and not one of them is seated next to the garbage. This is my table 1. I'm not telling you this story to give you a blueprint. Everybody's situation is different. Every person's threshold is their own. I don't know what your table 16 looks like, but if you're in one right now, if there is a room in your life where you are always at the back, always near the door, always made to feel that you should be grateful for the chair and not angry about where it's placed, I want to say something to you. You are allowed to stand up. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a best friend who is also a paralegal. You don't need a father who fills a doorway like a fixed point on a map. You just need to be clear past the guilt, past the self-doubt, past the voice that says you'll cause a problem and it isn't worth it, that the people you love have always deserved better. And if the person you are building a life with hears someone call your family poor and says, "You're right," they are not choosing you. They are choosing convenience. They are choosing the version of love that asks nothing difficult of them. That is not love. That is a seating arrangement. My name is Renata Calloway. I am 30 years old. I am a nurse, a charge nurse, a mother, and Jean and Vera Calloway's daughter. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with beige carpet and a bookshelf my father made from salvaged wood and a daughter who laughs like a surprised bird and has never once sat anywhere she didn't belong. I have never been more certain of where I come from. That's my story. Now I want yours. If you've ever had to choose your family over your comfort, type table 1 in the comments. If you think I did the right thing or the wrong thing or something complicated in between, tell me. I read everything. And that letter from Conrad, still in the nightstand drawer, still unanswered. I don't know what the right answer is yet. Maybe I'll know when Myra is old enough to have an opinion. If this story reached you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs it. And if you're new here, I'm glad you stayed until the end. There's another story in the description that I think you might connect with. Thank you for being here.